Hey everyone, it's Yajin here, and today we're going to talk about the one fix that you can go ahead and make to start burning 50% more calories. And this has nothing to do with exercise, this has everything to do with what you are actually eating, okay? So in order for me to break this down and help you truly understand this, we're going to go through a couple topics here. We're going to talk about processed foods, both kind of processed foods and super ultra processed foods. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the thermal effect on food. That's the calories that you're burning through digestion. And then we're going to break down this study where researchers had two groups consume. One group was consuming kind of processed food, and the other group was consuming ultra processed foods, and what the difference between those two groups were when it came to calorie burn. Then we're going to talk takeaways and how you can go ahead and apply this into your specific lifestyle and how you can start using this to burn more calories and start losing more weight, right? Because that's what we are all about here. So let's dive into it. What is a processed food? I think nowadays when we hear the term processed foods, we start to kind of think like, oh, wait a second. Processed foods, that's probably not something that's good for us. It doesn't belong in our diet. However, the way that one doctor put it, and I really like this explanation that he had, was basically a lot of the foods that we have nowadays go through some sort of processing process, right? However, not all of them are bad for us. For example, if you take vegetables and you freeze them, technically that's coming out as a processed food there. Versus something like a candy bar or a bag of chips where manufacturers take this ingredient and put it through this process where what comes out is no longer an actual food anymore. It's kind of like a food-like substance, but you wouldn't really be able to tell what a potato chip is made of if you didn't know it was a potato chip, right? You wouldn't know the actual food and the ingredients that went into it that it started out from. So basically, these ultra-processed foods are things that I usually recommend people to stay away from, especially when it comes to losing weight. And if you're just getting started in weight loss and you're maybe trying to jump below that 20% body fat range there, then cutting out processed foods, especially ultra-processed foods, is going to be the number one thing that can help you make that change. Because what happens in that processing stage is a lot of the times they're pumping in extra fats and extra sugars, these extra calories that you really don't need in your diet. Yes, it does taste better. However, when we're trying to lose weight, that's not helping us out in those cases, right? So that's kind of the quick breakdown there about processed foods. If you're watching this now and this video is helpful to you, do us a favor, drop down below, give us a quick like and subscribe. We're always trying to put out content to help you stay in better shape and lose weight in a healthy way. So now we're going to talk a bit about the thermal effect on food. And the thermal effect on food is basically the amount of calories that our body has to go through in order to break down and process foods through digestion, right? Because when we digest foods, it requires calories in order to break those foods down. And depending on the type of nutrients that go into those foods, we burn different amounts of calories as well. So for example, when we're consuming proteins, proteins typically take 20 to 30% of the calories that we're consuming in order to break the protein down. With carbs, it takes between 5 and 10% of the calories that we consume, and with fats, it takes 0 to 3%. Now, when I say that, my goal is not for you to say like, oh, in that case, I'm just not gonna eat any carbs and fats, I'm just gonna eat proteins, because when I eat proteins, 100 calories worth of proteins is only gonna end up costing me about 70 to 80 calories worth of net calories when I consume it, because the rest is going to burn off during digestion. Because we know nowadays that we need a healthy balance of proteins, of carbs, and healthy fats in our diet so our bodies can function properly. But that's just a quick breakdown. Now we can understand that when we eat certain foods, our body is able to break down or burn more calories depending on what we're actually eating. Now going into the actual study we're talking about today, a group of researchers was basically comparing two groups of people. One group was fed a ultra-processed sandwich, probably something like what you would find in a fast food restaurant. And the other group was fed a regular sandwich, which still is processed. However, compared to an ultra-processed food, you could say that this is probably less processed. Ideally, what they wanted to go through was feeding one group a whole food sandwich, but that's kind of difficult to come by because, it's hard to not process bread, right? I don't think that's even possible to not process bread. You have to go through some sort of processing. So anyways, one group was eating ultra processed, the other group was eating like a kind of processed sandwich. And they went ahead and fed these two groups and then tested the thermal effect that the body went through in order to digest these foods, and found out that the group that ate the less processed option burned 46.8% more calories in the digesting process compared to the group who was eating the ultra processed option. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the closer we can get to consuming whole real foods, the more calories that we can actually burn just from the digestion process after we eat these foods. So making that simple switch from just eat, if you were to eat a sandwich or a salad or anything, I mean, a salad's hard to process, but with the dressing and everything, yeah. Anyways, if you were to try to cut down your consumption of ultra processed foods and get as close as you can to whole real foods, which is what I encourage everyone to do, right? Stick to lean animal proteins if you're eating animal proteins. 50% of your meals should be vegetables. Stick to high fiber carbs, eliminate added sugars, and then eliminate processed foods from your diet. Those 5 things, simple steps to stick to. But by doing those things, you're going to start burning an extremely higher amount of calories just based off of what you're eating on a regular basis. Because a lot of people talk about the calorie in versus calorie out model. Basically, how many calories we're consuming, intake, right? And then how many calories are we putting out, expenditure. And based off of this study, we can kind of see that just by switching over from processed foods to less processed, or ideally whole real foods, not only are we burning more calories from eating those foods, but also by cutting out those processed foods, again, we're getting rid of all those added sugars, those added fats that really have no place in our diet, especially if our goal is long-term weight loss, right? So remember that when it comes to choosing the foods that you're eating, if you're trying to lose weight, you're almost like 100 times better off consuming whole real foods compared to anything processed. And again, that's not saying like cut out processed foods entirely. They have no place in your diet. But if you are to consume them, try to consume them as treats, right? Have them 5 to 10% of the time, and the rest of the time, try to stick to the plan. Try to stick to whole real foods that actually benefit your body in that way. So now that we kind of broke down the takeaway of that study, how do you apply this into your own life, right? Because I know I've been talking to a lot of people lately, and they've been mentioning that environment is something that they've been really struggling with, right? And when I say environment, this has to do with, the environment that you surround yourself in, whether this is an office place, this is your home, this is the people you hang out with. And for example, if you're trying to lose weight, you're gonna have a really rough time if you get home and there's just snacks laying around all over the place within hand's reach. You can just go ahead and grab a bag of chips, grab some candy bars, a snack, something that, is very easily accessible to you and probably doesn't belong in your diet. It's making it very easy for you to fall off track. Or you're going to the workplace and every day someone's bringing a box of donuts or a cake or some sort of snack and sharing it with everyone in the workplace. It's really hard to kind of distance yourself from those situations. Same thing with family members. If they're picking up a lot of chips and junk food and just bring them in, where that's kind of like the last thing that you want to be consuming for your weight loss, at least. So how do we approach this? How do we start to kind of change our own lifestyle in a way that we can start reducing the amount of processed foods we consume, but also start eating more whole real foods? I would always recommend, by starting out, to try to eliminate snacks, right? This means going into the cabinets and taking a look. If you have a bunch of snacks, candy, junk food, I know Halloween has just come and gone. If those things are there and you're telling yourself like, that doesn't belong in my diet, you're just better off throwing it out. If you don't want to waste food, go ahead and like give it away to someone else. However, the thing is that, if you're making it easy for you to just open the cabinet and grab something that doesn't belong in your diet, more likely than not, you're going to start eating that more and more and more sooner or later. I always try to touch back to this story where I used to always grab a box of cookies from the grocery store when I went to grab groceries, right? Most of my diet was pretty solid. However, I would always grab that box of cookies. Now, I would be at the grocery store 2 to 3 times per week, and I would take that box of cookies and just leave it on my desk. And because it was on my desk, I would kind of munch on it as I go throughout the day, as I was working, right? And then sooner or later, I was eating almost an entire box of cookies every single not every single day, but every time I left that box there, it would usually be gone by the end of the day. And that was about 4,000 calories worth of cookies, which is quite an insane amount of calories, right? If you added 4,000 calories a day to your diet, you would not be losing weight. Like just straight up, right? However, the simple fix there was what? Don't leave the cookies on the counter if you're not supposed to be eating too many cookies, right? Get it out there. I'm not saying don't eat the cookies. I'm saying if you're going out and it's like you really want a cookie, go grab one cookie. Not an entire box. Don't leave it on the counter. Don't make it easy for yourself to fail that way, right? So that's kind of like the one thing. When it comes to snacks, if you don't feel like you're supposed to be eating these things on a regular basis, get them out of the way. Stop consuming them. Don't make it so easy for yourself to go back to it, right? So I would start out with the snacks, and once you got the snack style down, then I would kind of start to break down the meals one by one. If you're used to eating out a lot, then I would recommend you to take a look at what you're normally consuming on a regular basis, and maybe you're eating a lot of fast food. If you're eating out a lot and eating a lot of fast food, then I tell people you should probably take a couple minutes and just real simple, bust out a list. You could do this on your phone, do it on a piece of paper, whatever it is, but make a decision beforehand and say, hey, the restaurants that I've been eating so far probably aren't really in line with my goals, right? They're not going to help me lose weight, especially if you're eating a lot of fast food. Like, let's be honest, right? And instead, if I do want to lose weight and continue eating out, I have the options of A, B, and C. And you can make a list as large as you want, so that now all of a sudden when you have to make that decision of, okay, I'm going to eat out, I have to make this decision of what to eat, you have a list of things that support you rather than trying to look around for which option is the quickest, the easiest. That's really how fast food works. They are convenient, they are quick, and they are easy, so that you can go anywhere, grab something real quick, and be done with it. However, if we kind of let them win in the sense of us showing up and eating their food, that's not going to help us when it comes to weight loss or our health and well-being in general, right? So do the homework beforehand, figure out what you're going to eat, and then once you're put on the spot and you have to make the decision's already made beforehand for you. Now, if you're prepping most of your meals, then for the most part, you shouldn't have too much of an issue with processed foods unless you're eating a lot of things that are prepped beforehand. And I'm not talking about food that you're prepping yourself. I'm talking about a lot of frozen options, a lot of snacks, a lot of things that you might pack with you to go. And I would recommend for you to basically break one meal down at a time. Start out with breakfast, switch that out, give it a couple weeks, and try different options out. Because a lot of times people will eat something like oatmeal and say like, oh, oatmeal tastes terrible. But first of all, if you're just eating oatmeal with like water or oatmeal with like milk and brown sugar, you're not doing the oatmeal very much justice. And I always like to bag on people who say that about oatmeal, because I eat a lot of oatmeal and I try to get creative with it, right? So play around with some fruits, some yogurt. Sometimes I even go with a salty option like chicken broth and things of that nature. You can add some meatballs or cheese, whatever you want, but play around and try new things out. If you're just getting started and you're like, I cannot stand going on a diet because the foods are just not working out for me, then the one thing that you really have to do is just start trying new things out. Because until you've actually tried something that you're like, oh, this is awesome, I want to go about like sticking to this, you're not really gonna know, right? So I would recommend for you to try different things out at that point and just swap them out one at a time. So try to switch out your snacks first, switch out your breakfast, switch out your lunch, switch out your dinner, and then keep on playing around with those. If you get sick of one, then change it up, try a new dish out. And yeah, so I feel like at this point I'm starting to ramble a little bit. But for those of you who have been watching up to this point, thank you for watching. I hope that this information was helpful to you in a certain way, shape, or form. If it was, go ahead, drop down below, do us a favor, give us a quick like and subscribe. We're always trying to put out more content and information to help you out when it comes to weight loss, fitness, and health and well-being in general. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.